All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Make no mistake about it that many people watch with good intent to see whether or not the Georgia would survive Georgia Tech this past Friday night in the latest edition of Clean Old Fashioned Hate. The Dogs have now won the last seven editions of this game, which dates back to 1893. But even in defeat for the Yellow Jackets on Friday, we're seeing that this team under head coach Brent Key is indeed closing the gap on their rivals from Athens. So Georgia won, and it was a lengthy affair as it took 8 overtime periods for the Dogs to prevail over the Yellow Jackets by the score of 44-42. But of course, the college football overtime is not exactly the traditional version of overtime that we've, started with in the National Football League. Of course, that's been tweaked, and maybe even a basketball overtime where there's a 5 minute period. If you've watched college football, you know that the overtime rules have basically been in place for about 30 years now. As you know what, we're going to have a winner. But, of course, the overtime period begins with the team having the football on their opponent's 25-yard line. And of course, over the years, for the most part, this has typically resulted in two teams trading touchdowns until somebody taps out. Of course, after the second overtime, if you scored a touchdown, you had to go for the 2 point conversion. Now that's been changed, and from the third overtime it's basically just swapping 2 point conversions. But for me, my thing is this: how about college football just simply adapting the same rules that are currently in the National Football League for overtime, or maybe even possibly a sudden death period? Because you look at it like this, Georgia did win this game, clearly, okay? But you go back to that fourth quarter, and of course, the Dogs were down, but they weren't out, okay? But the fourth quarter belonged to them, it belonged to their defense as they got it going. They went out there and made the key plays in the comeback against Georgia Tech. Nonetheless, Georgia as a team had the momentum going into the overtime period. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, you have a traditional Southern death overtime period in college football. Let's say that Georgia Tech wins that football. We know, wins a coin toss rather. We know that Haynes King was a one-man wrecking crew on Friday night in Athens for the Yellow Jackets, but we did see Georgia rather, defensively make the key plays when necessary. Their defense was flying around the football. They had momentum. Who's to say that Georgia couldn't have gone out there on a full 100-yard field and made a play? Who's to say that Georgia Tech offensively couldn't have gone out there and made a play? We'll never know. But nonetheless, aside from that game, me personally, I don't know about anybody else. I've never really been a fan of just getting the football at your opponent's 25-yard line. I feel like, we've had about 3 decades of this. I think as the sport of college football is evolving, you figure when the overtime rules were put in place, we still had the Big Ten and the Pac-10 locked in to the Rose Bowl. We didn't even have the BCS at the time. We've evolved from that. We've gone from the BCS, we've gone to the 14 playoff. Now we've got a 12-team playoff, and we're still relying on an overtime period. I think that kind of cheapens the game. These kids on defense, they can go out there and make plays. Okay, I think they should have the whole field at their disposal to go down there. I think you should just be given the benefit of the doubt. You're in scoring position and you can go out there and make it a play. I mean, you think about it from the aspect of basketball. An overtime period in basketball, it doesn't come down to a game of horse. It's going to come down to who's going to score the most points and who's going to prevent the other team from scoring points. Granted, we've seen games go into double overtime and triple overtime, but you still have a 5 minute period of going up and down the court to try to figure it out. I think about the old days. I think it was either the CBA or the USBL, where the overtime period, the first team is 7-1. Nonetheless, you still had to go out there and make the plays. I have always been in favor of sudden death in the National Football League. I know that they've tweaked it over the years. But nonetheless, you still got to go out there and you got to defend the entire field to go out there and win. And, for me, like I keep saying, college football is one of the best things going, okay, sport wise. And it's so doggone exciting already. I personally would just love to see the power brokers of the sport just simply, adjust with the times and adapt. I mean, you do something like this at the Pee Wee level. Okay, this college football is a big time thing, and it's a big time moneymaker. This ain't the Pee Wee level. And I mean, this game came down to who could make a 2 point conversion or not. And eventually, both teams realized, hey, we're not getting anywhere passing the football. Let's try to run. Georgia had the better running game. Because of that, and we saw the Bulldogs come back and win this contest. But nonetheless, it shouldn't be determined by 2 yards on the field. It should be determined by the whole field. Hopefully, this is something again that the power brokers will look at in the coming off season, if not sooner, or maybe in the next year or two. But at the end of the day, I just think that giving teams the football at the opponent's 25-yard line to start overtime, the whole 2 point conversion jive, to me, I just think it cheapens it. This is just my opinion. These are just my thoughts. Agree with me if you want, disagree with me if you want. It is all good. But hopefully, in my opinion, something will change sooner rather than later with the overtime rules in college football. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And I want to take the time out to thank, excuse me, all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.